Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. This is episode number 161 on the Pranzata Podcast here on YouTube. This is a solo episode today with my companion, Jazzy, joining me in this episode. And today I am going to be doing a review of 2025 and setting my goals and intentions for the year 2026. This is actually the first time in a while I remember doing a solo episode, so I'm going to be filling you guys in on what 2025 was like for me, which happened to be possibly one of the most difficult years of my life. It was riddled with illness and depression and all kinds of things, so I'm going to be sharing the details of that with you guys. Although I must say, even though 2025 has been very difficult for me, things finally started turning around, I want to say in September, and they have been looking up. So I'm feeling so much more hopeful for 2026. So I'm just going to get right into it with what were the primary difficulties for me in 2025. For those of you who listen to this podcast, you may already know that I had a deviated septum nose surgery, which I'm going to be getting more into details later in this podcast. So first, I'm going to be starting with why I got the surgery and how this all began. So when I first moved into this apartment I'm currently in now in Philadelphia, I've been living here for about 2 years now. So at the start of this year, January 2025, I was already knee deep in the issues that had started in this apartment. So some of this actually started in 2024, but 2025 is where it got really bad. So when I first moved in here, and I was so excited to move in here, it was a dream my entire life to live in a city. And prior to moving in here, I had been recovering from some pretty heavy financial issues that made it really difficult for me to get an apartment. I had a low credit score that I had to work through. I didn't have any security deposit saved up, and I really worked my ass off. I was running my own piano lessons, teaching studio, and on top of that, I was driving for Uber and I was doing DoorDash as a way to make extra income in order to be able to afford to move into my own apartment. So getting into this apartment was not easy for me. It took a lot of willpower. It took a lot of discipline. It took a lot of saying no to things that I really wanted to do. Not buying coffee when I wanted to buy coffee, not going out with my friends when I was getting invited. I pretty much just worked 80-hour work weeks in order to make my dream come true of having my own apartment in a city for the first time in my life and to podcast here. And I had nothing but wonderful visions for living here. The first month of living here was actually great, I will say. I really enjoyed decorating. I enjoyed the part of Philadelphia that I'm living in. There's just such beautiful cafes and restaurants and a lot of small business owners and creators doing their thing around here. So really, I love this neighborhood. It's a dream come true for me. However, about a month after moving in here, I started to experience some pretty significant issues breathing, which was something that I had never really experienced much in my entire life. I had maybe had one instance of some type of allergic reaction that lasted 2 weeks in my life, but that was it. It was never something I had an issue with. I remember going to the doctor and they told me that I had some type of allergy, but I needed to go to an allergist in order to figure out what the allergy was. So I went to an allergist. I got tested for, all the allergies, animals. I was so afraid that I was going to be allergic to my cats. Thank God I'm not allergic to cats. I'm not allergic to dogs. I'm not allergic to any pollen. I'm not allergic to any plants, nothing like that. The only thing that showed up on my allergy test was an allergy to dust mites, which sort of made sense to me because I know sometimes in the winter I get a very itchy nose, and I assumed it was from being trapped indoors and the dust kind of circulating around the house. But it was something that was never that severe and would always clear up just fine when the weather started to warm up again. I followed all the necessary dust mite remedies. I cleaned my apartment from head to toe. I don't have any carpets in this apartment. It's all hardwood floors, so it was pretty easy to keep everything clean in here. I threw away old furniture. I got dust mite proof covers for my bedding. I vacuumed constantly. I washed my bed sheets constantly. I did everything that somebody with a dust on my allergy should do. And on top of that, I was taking nasal steroid sprays. I was doing saline rinses, which is a neti pot in my nose. And I was taking allergy medication. And I tried every allergy medication you have. I tried Allegra, I tried fexofenadine, all that stuff. Months were going by and I wasn't improving at all. And as a matter of fact, I was actually getting progressively worse. On one instance, I actually ended up in the hospital. I remember going to the gym because I was trying my best to keep up with my lifestyle during all of this. I remember I was going on dating apps and trying to set up dates, and I would not be able to last very long on these dates. I would, meet guys for a short hour and then tell them I had to go home early, and, things weren't really going very well there. And I would try to keep up with the gym. And what would happen was I would get ready, go to the gym, do the best I could. And there were some days where I could only stay at the gym for 20 minutes and then I would have to walk back home. But I remember one instance in particular, I walked to the gym. Wasn't a very hot day. I was very well hydrated. I had enough food to eat. I really made sure I took care of myself so I could get through my workout. By the time I walked to the gym, and we're talking, this is about a 10-minute walk, I was so out of breath because there was so much inflammation and blockage in my nose that I started to black out and I started to faint. And thankfully, I did not faint at the gym. At this point, I wasn't working out because it started by the time I got to the gym. So I just sat in the lobby of the gym and I kind of put my head between my shoulders like they say you're supposed to do when you feel like you're going to faint, which I think helped. I let my senses come back to me and the blackness started going away and I started to regain consciousness again. And at this point, I was like, something might be really wrong because I've been following, the protocol of treating allergies for well over 3 or 4 months at this point, and I'm near fainting. So I went to the hospital and they took care of me at the hospital. And at the end of the visit, they told me, we've done all the tests, we've taken your blood tests, we've taken examination of inside your head and whatever they do, MRIs and stuff like that, or CAT scan. I'm not sure what they did. It's been a while yet, but they looked at everything and they said, the only thing that makes sense is you have some kind of allergy. So I kept getting the same response back from everybody. I had a lot of inflammation inside my nose that was blocking my breathing. And because of that, I couldn't breathe. And that's why I was getting dizzy and fainting. And it was due to some sort of allergy because they couldn't see any reason other than an allergy, what could be causing that inflammation. So at this point, I was losing it mentally because I had been following everything I was supposed to do. I had an allergy test, and the one thing that they said I had an allergy for, I was doing everything I possibly could and nothing was helping. So at this point, I kind of started going almost mentally crazy because there's this problem and I'm eager to fix it. I'm willing to fix it. I care about my health. I'm a hardworking person, but I have no clear direction on how to fix this. And I started looking at my entire environment to try to figure out what the hell could be causing this. I replaced water filters. I replaced curtains. Maybe there's, dust mites in the curtains. I was almost becoming scared of everything around me. I was scared to walk in the city. I thought maybe I'm allergic to the city of Philadelphia. Maybe I'm allergic to the air pollution in here. It was a very confusing time for me. It was a very dark time for me because pretty much every day consisted of me surviving the day, of taking care of my health needs, making sure I could get through a work day without fainting. And like I said, I was trying to socialize. I was trying to go on dates and, meet a guy. I was trying to go to friend hangouts because I was, the first year that I moved here, I did make a lot of connections in the music scene here. So, and in the comedy scene as well. So I had friends inviting me out and I had to frequently tell everybody, I'm sorry, I can't come today. I don't feel good. And I felt like a bad friend. I felt like a shitty friend because I couldn't show up to anything. So, like I said in the beginning of the episode, I really put so much energy to get into this apartment and I had really big dreams for myself here. But what happened here was nothing like I thought it would be. I was alone almost every day because I didn't have the energy to socialize, and every day was just me getting through my work day, and really excited to go to bed, because at this point, resting was the only thing that felt good to me, and I couldn't find any answers. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I don't want to say I was becoming suicidal, because thankfully I have 2 cats, as you saw in the beginning of the episode. One of my cats was on my lap, and they really hold me accountable. If you suffer with depression, I recommend getting pets, because especially if you don't have like a partner, or if you're not close with your family, I think having something to take care of gives you a reason to live, no matter how hard your life is. But I really truly feel like at this time, my cats were the only reason I even wanted to live. And, you know, I don't want to scare anybody. It's not that I had plans to commit suicide, but I had a death wish. And quite honestly, my feelings were completely logical. If all I could live for was to get out of bed, get through a work day, and then to go home alone in an apartment and sleep and not socialize, then really logically what was really good about life at this point. And like I said, of course you can have hope for things to get better, but I was doing everything I possibly could and nothing was working, and I wasn't getting any answers on how to get better. So during this time, I really had a real understanding on what depression is, and on what people who become suicidal, from my experience, it's not that they don't have hope for the future. It's that when they think things through, they logically believe there's no way out of their situation. And if you logically believe there is no hope out of this situation, it's not that let me rephrase myself. It's not that they don't want to have hope for the future. It's not that they're a negative person. It's just that when they look at all the facts, they say, I don't see a way out of this maze. And when there's no way out, then what's the point? And that's the place that I got to this year, because I felt horrible. In addition to all this pain I was experiencing, not being able to breathe and getting lightheaded and dizzy all the time, at the same time, I started to develop serious GI issues where I wasn't able to digest almost any food at all that I was eating. My diet was limited to very few things, including white rice, bananas, and extremely lean proteins like chicken. Those were the only things I could pretty much eat and not feel sick and not have nausea, which I think is all somehow related to where we're going next. And by the way, I did a whole video on my channel on how I resolved my GI issues, because that was a whole nother process in itself. And this episode is going to be way too long if I even get into that. I want to stick with the breathing issues to kind of keep things concise here. But if anyone's interested, if anybody's had any gut related issues and they needed to reset their gut microbiome, I have a whole video on my channel where I talk about how I was able to heal my own gut without the help of doctors, because that was a whole side journey that I went through this year, where I had to get a colonoscopy and I was getting tossed around to all these different doctors trying to figure out what was wrong with my stomach. And that was something I had to relieve on my own. But anyways, back to this initial story here. Because I couldn't figure out what in my environment was making me so sick, I asked my sister if I could spend a week at her house to see if being out of my environment would somehow clear things up and help me possibly figure out if there's something in my apartment that was causing this harm. Because I figured, well, if I go to my sister's house and I'm still sick, then it's just me. Maybe something's wrong with me. But if I go to my sister's house and feel better, then obviously there's something in my environment at home that's hurting me. So I figured it could help me solve the puzzle in some kind of way. So I guess I didn't lose hope. As much as I wanted to say I started to lose hope, I was still trying to figure things out. But the losing hope was like exhaustion. There would be times where I would have energy to try to solve this puzzle, and after months of trying to solve it, I would lose my will and I would just get very depressed and exhausted. But then the hope would come back sometimes after, a month of rest. And this is one of those instances where I felt determined to try to figure this out. And my sister said yes. So I spent a week at my sister's house. After spending a week with my sister, my breathing started to come back within the first 2 or 3 days of being at her house. So clearly there was something wrong at my apartment, that to be away from my apartment for only a few days was causing some of this to clear out. Even though me breathing again sounds like it would be a positive thing, there was a whole other host of side effects that came with repairing the damage that was occurring inside of my nose. And one was this chronic postnasal drip. So what happens is when you have inflammation inside your nose and your sinuses, when it starts to heal, the healing process itself is incredibly difficult and painful because you start to form scabs. And then in your nose, which is, a good part of the process because it's healing the skin that was damaged from the chronic inflammation. But then your body produces extra mucus, which, to clarify, believe it or not, some people that I've talked to didn't understand what mucus was. They thought it was phlegm. Phlegm is when you're sick. Phlegm is mucus mixed with a more thick secretion from getting over a virus. But just healthy mucus is very clear. But regardless, when your body is healing from some type of internal damage, you start to produce this excess mucus that comes constantly, and then it creates postnasal drip. And for me, postnasal drip was terrible because I have TMJ, which I've had on and off my entire life. For those of you who don't know, it's when there's a misalignment in your jaw. And sometimes your jaw, where it hinges, the joint of where your mouth opens and closes, can sometimes become out of alignment, and it causes radiating pain all up through your head and through your neck, and it causes migraines and whatnot. It's something that has come and go throughout my life, but it was never a chronic issue. It was something that I would get for maybe a few weeks, and then it would go away for a few months, and I might be lucky and have a whole year without it, but then it would come again. Unfortunately, this clearing of this debris to heal my nose triggered a very severe episode of my TMJ that was brutal. So I couldn't even enjoy the effects of my breathing because now I was dealing with this secondary issue of pain, which only furthered my desire to isolate myself because talking was incredibly painful. I didn't podcast a lot of this year. So for my loyal listeners who are wondering what happened to me last year, everyone always looked up to me as this hardworking, motivated person, and I kind of really fell off the map with productivity. That's because it was so painful to even talk because of these TMJ issues. Fast forward to when I came back to my apartment, I now had my answers that it was clearly something in my apartment. I just had to really look around for what. A couple people had mentioned to me the possibility of mold. And this is a brand new building. So I told people, I was like, I don't even know where mold could be in this building. It's a brand new apartment building that I just moved into. So there's really no water damage. I don't understand where the mold could be. I don't smell any mold. I don't see any mold. I don't see visible spots. I don't smell any strange smells. So it was very perplexing to me. Where could this mold be coming from? But I basically used ChatGPT, which, everybody shits on ChatGPT. But in this case, this was a very excellent use of this technology. I basically asked ChatGPT, I said, where are the possible places that you can commonly find mold in your apartment? Please tell me and show me how to inspect each one of these places. And mind you, at this point, I had already had my landlords come do a mold inspection. I explained to them everything that was going on. I told them about how I went to my sister's house and how I had been sick and hospitalized and everything like that. And it was clearly something related to this apartment. And they came, they did a little visual inspection. They hired professional, mold experts to do a mold test. They weren't able to find anything. So for those of you who want to make the argument that we should be resorting to the experts and not ChatGPT, I did resort to the experts and they didn't help. So I asked ChatGPT Give me the list of where I can find the mold. And I said, be as thorough as possible because I know it's coming from somewhere. They listed the oven, the dishwasher, the washer, the dryer, walls and everything like that. So I inspected all these different places. And the one interesting thing was the dryer. I didn't even think you can get mold in a dryer because it dries and it's not wet, right? So it's not even something I thought of. I had already checked the washer months ago because it's something I already thought about, the possibility of mold or dust accumulating in there. What ChatGPT said was that sometimes your dryer ventilation can get clogged up. And when this happens, the condensation from the clothes being wet can get stuck in it and actually grow mold. So to my surprise, I checked the dryer vent, which at this point I learned my dryer did not have a traditional ventilation system going outside of the apartment building. It was something called a ventless dryer, in which there is a lint catcher deep within the dryer that you have to clean out every 2 months or so. Keep in mind that I already knew, obviously, about the front lint catcher. Everybody knows about that. In the front of the dryer, you have that lint catcher. You're supposed to clean every single time you use it. But I have never in my entire life heard of a ventless dryer where there's this extra compartment deep inside the dryer that you have to go in and pull it out and clean it out every 2 months. It's never something I've heard of in my entire life, and it's not something that my landlords informed me of, and it's not something that was in the lease. But regardless, upon cleaning out this ventless dryer contraption, my dryer had been completely filled with dust that was growing black mold on it. Not only had it been growing there, but it had been growing there for over a year that I've been living there. Which means, and this is a pretty small apartment, by the way. I live by myself. It's bigger than a studio. It has 1 bedroom, but it's not a huge 1-bedroom apartment. That means the entire year and a half that I had been living here, there had been remnants of black mold on top of dust circulating in the vent system. And it makes perfect sense why I was progressively getting more and more sick. And I believe that most likely this had something to do with the nausea and GI issues that I had developed, because I heard that black mold can cause a serious number on your system, on your entire body. It can cause all kinds of issues. It can cause anxiety. It can cause depression. It can cause full body inflammation, gut health issues. And in my case, that seems to be exactly what was going on. I was having gut issues, skin issues, itching, trouble breathing, everything that's associated with mold illness I was getting. I called the landlords again. I asked them to send somebody in, and they had a maintenance guy in and thoroughly clean it out for me, because I was, able to clean it up myself, but I wanted to make sure it was really taken care of. And I was really pissed at them, and I told them, why didn't you guys tell me about this type of dryer? If it needs to be cleaned out every 2 months, this is something that you should be telling your tenants. I've told this to a lot of people, and some people are like, you definitely have a lawsuit on your hands here. Personally, I don't think I want to go through with a lawsuit, because at the time I didn't take any photos of the black mold I found. So even though if I had taken more evidence of what had happened and I was taking photos, I could have definitely had a lawsuit. I think at this point, I'm finally starting to get better, which we're going to get to again soon, of the positives of this year and looking forward. I think I just want to focus on that right now, being in the here and now and going forward. As soon as I started to clean out everything after this, the landlords cleaned this out and I made sure everything was clean here, I immediately started to feel better, but I was never 100% myself again. I would say probably upon moving into this apartment, my breathing was generally 7 out of 10. By the time I lived here, after several months, my breathing was 1 or 2 out of 10. And then by the time I cleaned out the issue, my breathing was like a 5 out of 10. So while I was significantly better, I was never back to square one. And on top of that, I was continuously dealing with TMJ because the ongoing chronic inflammation of having your nose blocked up from chronic inflammation takes months and months of healing. So I was getting all of that excess mucus dripping down my throat, and it was causing my TMJ. So I was still pretty bad, even though I was getting better. I went to my ENT to ask them if there's anything else I could do to aid the healing process. And he took a look inside of my nose and, with a camera. And he basically told me that even though I was healing, it's really difficult to recover from something like this quickly. And in addition to healing the tissue, I have a pretty significant deviated septum inside my nose. And he believed that if I corrected the deviated septum in my nose, it would help compensate for any of the damage that was done from the mold. So I put some thought into it and I decided to go through with the surgery. So the surgery itself, for me, and I'm giving this information for anybody who was also told that they need this surgery, because from what I understand, this is actually a pretty common surgery that a lot of people need. So if anybody was thinking of getting this or has been told that they might need it, overall, the surgery was so worth it. It helped me so much. But to explain what I personally went through to go through the surgery, my recovery from the surgery personally was actually pretty difficult because I was already dealing with healing so much of that inflammation that I had had through the year that I knew that me going into the surgery was going to just dive deep into the worst inflammation you could get, because I had already been through so much, and it was definitely a risk I had to consider taking. But after I kind of looked at everything, I was like, well, I'm not healing completely by myself. I still can't breathe the way I could before all of this started. So I'm going to just dive right into this and go through all this pain again, and in hopes that I'm going to come out on the other side and eventually get better. So it was something where I was getting better, but then I kind of had to go backwards in order to move forward. So anyone who's considering getting a deviated septum surgery correction, I recommend taking 2 weeks off from work, if I'm going to be honest. Some people tell you, oh, you can go back to work, but maybe things were just harsher for me because I had already been dealing with so much, and that's why it was a little harder for me. But I was finding that the inflammation was so bad that I was having trouble breathing again, and the majority of my days were spent just sleeping all day and getting very basic things done around the house that would really knock the wind out of me. Like I would try to cook something for myself, and just that alone would make me want to go back to sleep, because it was a lot for me and it was painful. There was a lot of pain. But I would say the worst of that took 3 weeks at most. The first 2 weeks were pretty bad for me. The third week, I started feeling a lot better, but I still don't think I was myself yet. And by the fourth week, I was good enough. And right now, I got the surgery September 24th, 2025. It is now December. I don't know the exact date. Wait, hold on. Let me think about this for a second. 28th. Today is December 28th, 2025. So it's been a little over 3 months roughly since I've gotten this surgery. And at this point, I want to say it feels like I'm pretty healed for the most part. According to what the surgeon says, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to get these amazing, amazing benefits. But as far as being as good as I started before the mold, I'm definitely there. As a matter of fact, I would say my breathing might even be better than before I had this mold issue. Because going backwards, like I had said, my breathing at best was always a 7 out of 10. And that was probably because of my deviated septum. it went down to a 2 out of 10 after the mold issue. Self-healing, it got up to like a 5 out of 10. And I would say right now it's like 7 or 8 out of 10 again. So, but according to the surgeon, in 3 to 6 months, or even sometimes a year, depending on some people. And the reason for that is because nasal tissue takes a very long time to repair. It's one of the most sensitive parts of your body. And if you have an internal issue in your sinuses or your nose, the healing process is brutally slow, which would explain why I was having so many issues over the year, because that chronic inflammation and that chronic exposure to the allergen and not knowing it and being exposed constantly was just making it worse and worse. So right now I feel pretty great. And not only that, but my TMJ finally stopped. My TMJ had gone on about a month or 2 post-surgery. And I want to say that most of this month it's been gone. I'll occasionally get a bad day here and there where I have a flare-up of TMJ, but I'm talking chronic TMJ over the past year. Not over the past year, but over the past few months, I had chronic TMJ as I was healing. Right now, I'll have 6 good days and 1 bad day. And I actually think the bad days are related to the weather. So right now it's winter, you know, it's about to be January. It's the end of December. So when there's an especially cold day, I think it actually kind of puts me back a little bit and it causes more inflammation. And I think that's when I get the post-nasal drip and TMJ. But besides that, I'm doing very well. I'm on the up, and thank God I found out what was wrong. Thank God for ChatGPT helping me figure out what was wrong when the professionals couldn't help me. Thank God for the surgery I got, and that I'm doing maybe possibly even better than I was before any of this started. So yeah, to recap this year, from the beginning of the year all the way until September, it was a year of hell for me, where I almost lost complete hope for my future. And now things are turning. So the end of the year took a wonderful turn. My health started to get better. And on top of that, I met an amazing guy. And that means a lot to me, because my romantic life has been something that has been very difficult for me over the years. I had met some great guys, don't get me wrong. I'm not one to bash my exes. I think all my exes were amazing people. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been with them. They were all very talented. You know, I was lucky enough to date these great musicians. So they were very talented and some of them were very kind people. But a lot of them were not fit for a full-time, long-term relationship for me due to certain issues. You know, there'd be some instances where every relationship was different. But for example, there were some instances where, you know, I was with this amazing guy, but he struggled with an addiction issue. And then I would have to face that and decide if it was something I was willing to see if it would change or walk away. And there was a lot of that with me throughout the years. And, you know, some of those incompatibilities, I don't even want to blame the other person for. I want to take the blame as well, because in many instances, I would actively ignore red flags that I would see in people in hopes that the physical connection or the romantic connection that we had would somehow be stronger than these things. So really, I have a lot of credit to take for those mistakes and not listening to my gut feelings at the beginning of relationships and getting involved with people that were not healthy or fit for a relationship. But regardless, I don't necessarily regret dating any of those people that had those struggles. They all taught me something, and I learned a lot from each relationship that I was in. But that's the past. Here and now, and the reason I bring that up is, you know, to point that I almost started to lose hope romantically too. Especially with the health issues I was going through, I thought I wouldn't have the energy to love another person, or I thought that I started to become a little cynical and think that maybe nobody would like me with those issues, that I would get into a relationship and I would just be this sick person all the time. And I'll never forget this. I went to, in one of my doctor's appointments, like I said, it's just like so depressing. My whole year was just health and doctor's appointments. At one of my doctor's appointments, the woman was taking my blood work, and I was scared. And it's funny because I have a full arm of tattoos, but I'm still scared to get the needle in my arm for blood work. But I was shaking and I was so scared to get this needle. And she said, just close your eyes and imagine your wedding day. It was her way of, trying to get me to take my mind off of the pain. And then I just started laughing and I said, what wedding day? I said, I'll never find a guy. And she just looked at me and she said, your day is coming way closer than you realize. And I almost want to cry just telling that story for a couple of different reasons. For one, it's just a tiny example of somebody giving hope to another person. Because like I said, at this point, I kind of lost hope for myself and I lost hope for my future. And in many different ways, romantically, career, financially, health, everything just kind of fell apart for me. And just this one act of kindness from another human being to me when I needed it, she just said, don't worry, your time is coming way sooner than you think. It just made me feel so taken care of and cared for in that moment when I really needed it. I really needed hope. And just her saying that gave me a little bit of hope. But all that to say, it was funny timing she said that, because just a few weeks later, I met the person I'm with now. And things have been nothing but great vibes between us ever since we met. We met actually 1 week before I got my surgery. And I was so scared. We had a really nice first date. And in my head, I was like, well, that's great, but he's going to leave me because I'm just going to be this sick person going through surgery. And that wasn't the case at all. He got me flowers. I just met this guy and he showed me so much kindness when I thought he was going to walk away. And I don't know, I'm getting so emotional right now. It's just because, like I said, it's hard to believe that things actually turned around for the better for me after everything I went through. But yeah, no, he stayed around and he has been amazing ever since. And it's been nothing but good vibes between us. I mean, I don't want to jinx it because, like I said, I've had experiences in the past where I had these great people, but they suffered from these demons that were hard to stay around for forever. And everybody has their demons. You're never going to find a perfect person. I'm sure he has his demons as well. But I'm feeling very confident that what we have is a very good thing. We're very compatible in multiple ways. He's a really great person. I feel like we bring the best out of each other. I've seen so many good things come out of him ever since I've been with him, and vice versa. He inspires me as well to get my life back together and to work hard again. So everything's been really great so far. So yeah, I feel really lucky. And I don't know why this is so hard to talk about right now. I want to say, looking back at the year I've had, being sick all the time, one lesson I've learned is all the problems that you think you have, you don't actually have. And what I mean by that is the petty things in life, the arguments you get with friends. If someone's rude to you on the street and you can't stop thinking about them, or if the person making your coffee is put the wrong milk in, you know what I mean? The things that make you irritable and the things that make you angry, none of that matters. None of those problems are real. If you think you look fat in a dress, like, the silly, mundane, stupid issues, none of those are real. The only thing that matters is if you have your health and you have someone to love. And that doesn't necessarily mean romantically. Like in my case, I had a connection with my cats, before I met my partner. And as silly as that sounds, and as much as like the single cat lady trope is, it is a real thing that if you have love and connection with anything, even an animal, you have something to live for. So again, to reiterate, what I learned after all this is that none of your problems are real. The only important thing is your health and those that you love, whether that be people or animals, or yourself, and connection with nature. You know what I mean? I guess connection, if love isn't a word that makes sense here, then connection is. Connection with something greater than you, connection with the things and the people around you, and taking care of something more important than you, like a child or a loved one or an animal, and your health. So as long as you have your health, you can get through anything. Financial problems, relationship problems with your friends, anything like that can be overcome if you have your health. So moving on to some of my plans for 2026. I've already been talking for a while now, so I'm going to be more brief and short with this so we can get to this end of the episode. Talking for an hour is actually really hard to do with a solo episode, so I try not to go too long. I like having a guest for that reason. It kind of gives my throat a little break from talking constantly. One of my priorities for 2026 is to get my physical fitness back. Now that I have full control over my body again, I can breathe again, I feel alive, I can move about the world comfortably again. I don't want to take that for granted, and I want to take care of my body. I want to eat right. I want to look as good as I possibly can, as shallow as that might seem, but I want to age well. I'm 37 going on 38, and I want to be happy and comfortable in my skin. And, there's a lot of benefits that come with looking good. Looking good usually comes with feeling good. I want to do things in a way in regards to looking and feeling good and taking care of my health. I want to think more long-term about it and not short-term. I don't want to do any short-term like keto diet or water fast or work out every day for 30 days. I've done stuff like that in the past. I want to think the long game. I want to be smart about this. So right now I'm lifting weights 4 times a week, and that's it. I give myself 3 days of rest because as I'm reading and learning a lot about this, your muscles grow while they're resting, not while you're working out. While you're working out, your muscle fibers tear and split. So you need rest days in order for muscles to grow. And that's a mistake I made in my 20s. I suffered many injuries in my 20s because I was an idiot and I worked out every single day. That's why I'm learning as an adult that health and fitness is a long game, and it's meant to be done in a modest, realistic way. And it's interesting how the ego can show up in everything you do. So if you show up with this mindset of like, I'm going to be the best and I'm going to do this and I'm going to conquer this, and you overdo it and you don't have any sense of modesty in what you're doing or a long-term strategy in what you're doing, you'll burn out really quickly, like I did in my 20s. And, so now that I'm tackling fitness as a more mature woman, approaching my 40s pretty soon, I want to think about how can I do fitness in a way that sustains me into my 60s, 70s, and if I'm lucky, my 80s and 90s. And for me, that's going to be taking adequate rest days, eating enough calories. So to explain what I'm doing diet-wise to take care of things, I am eating as much protein as I can, which is surprisingly difficult to do. Apparently, if you want to grow muscle, you're supposed to try to eat 1 gram of protein for every pound of your body. So for me, I'm about 130 pounds. So I want to aim to eat 130 grams of protein per day. Surprisingly difficult to do. Even if you eat meat at every single meal, I often still fall short. So what I've been doing to add on to eating the meat at every single meal is I bought protein powder, which I'm putting in shakes every day. And I eat a lot of quinoa, which is a carbohydrate that has protein in it. I eat cottage cheese and Greek yogurt. With those additions, and then trying to eat meat at every single meal or eggs with breakfast, I'm finding that it's become so much easier to eat as much protein as I need for the day. In terms of calories, I am counting calories not to lose weight because I'm actually happy with the weight I'm at now. I'm just eating to make sure that I don't accidentally overdo it and put on fat. So right now I'm eating at maintenance, which for me is about 2,300 calories. This is going to be different for every single person. So for anybody listening, looking for inspiration here, this is wildly different for every single person. For some reason, I've always been able to eat a little more calories than some of my peers, my weight. A lot of maintenance calories for females, my size and weight is usually around 1,800 or 1,900. For some reason, my metabolism allows me to eat a little bit more. So everybody's different. So the only way to figure that out would be to test it on your own, to try counting calories for a day and seeing how you feel the next day. I think it's usually pretty straightforward. If at the end of the day you go to bed feeling starving, then you're probably losing weight. If you go to bed feeling nourished but not full, you're probably maintaining. And if you go to bed feeling fat, you're probably getting fat. So I think it's pretty easy to figure out. You just kind of have to test with the numbers yourself and figure out what works for you. But like I said, for me, I'm pretty good clocked in at about 2,300 calories is my maintenance. So besides the protein, I'm not obsessing over how many carbs or fats I'm getting. I'm making sure I get both, with protein being the most important one. And then as long as I hit my 2,300 calories, I don't really care about the perfect ratios of carbohydrates and fats. I just make sure I get everything, so everything is well-rounded. I'm also taking a lot of supplements right now to give myself some additional support. I'm taking vitamin D, especially because it's the winter. I'm taking vitamin C. I'm taking bone matrix, which is for collagen and a host of other things, because I don't eat a lot of bone, which is something I actually really want to get into this year, is making my own bone broth so I could get a lot of those nutrients naturally without having to take this bone matrix pill. But that's something I'm taking right now. I'm taking NAC, glutathione, and creatine. Creatine is really good if you're trying to build muscle, but it's also good for many other things as well. It's not just for maintaining and building muscle. It's also really good for improving your mood. Apparently it's really good for depression and anxiety, which I could say could very well possibly be true, because this is the first time in a long time that I'm off my antidepressants and I feel pretty darn good. But it could be any of the supplements I'm taking. It could be a mixture of things I'm taking. It could be the fact that I'm working out regularly again. There could be a lot of reasons, but that's another thing to feel good about this year, is that despite everything I've been through, I've been on Zoloft, sertraline, for about 7 years now, and I've never been able to go off of it successfully. And this is the first few months that I've been off of it in years, and I'm feeling pretty great right now. So that's something very positive to think about. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to fill in about the fitness end of things, because I'm also sharing this information if anybody else, wants to go on a fitness journey themselves. I guess all I'll say is that, going back to the exercise routine, I'm focusing on weight training and not cardio. I still do a little bit of cardio, but very little bit. The majority of my focus is weight training, and I aim to progressively add more weights as much as possible. Of course, you have to listen to your body. You have to start where you can. But the idea with weightlifting is you want to try to each week to increase your weights as your body sees fit. So for example, this is something you do want to do modestly as well, because when I was in my 20s, I was able to squat 200 pounds. Now I was only able to squat 35 pounds. That's a huge difference. But the reason I'm starting here is because my form is all messed up now. For years of not working out, I've lost my technique. So right now I'm squatting 35 pounds, but I'm focusing on really precise technique. And the goal is that by next week or the week after, I should be able to squat 40 to 45 pounds. You know, when I say progressively getting heavier, they call it progressive overload. The idea isn't to start with 35 and then next week squat 200. The idea is to get a little bit more each week. And if you follow that, you will grow muscle. Your muscles will get stronger to adapt to what your muscles will grow stronger in order to adapt to the weight requirements that you're putting on yourself. But you have to do it smart, and you have to do it modestly and leave your ego out of it and listen to your body. Listen to your body in the sense that know the difference between good sore and bad sore. That's also something that takes experimentation. But for me, if I feel pain on just one side, that usually means something was off with my technique. But if I feel this overall sense of soreness, that means I just had a good workout. So you want to listen to your body, but you don't want to underperform either. You don't want to say, oh, I'm listening to my body and I'm tired, so I can't do this. No, you want to push yourself, but you want to push yourself to a point where you feel that good sore, not the bad sore. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I touched on my fitness regimen. I touched on my nutrition and my attitude towards it overall. Yeah, so that's really exciting for me. So one of my goals this year is to get very fit again. Another thing I will say, and I'm going to leave this brief, maybe I'll get into more detail in another episode, but to end the episode, I want to say what my goals are for the future of this podcast. While I was sick and I wasn't producing as much content, I had time to reflect on what I want to do with this channel. And one thing I realized is that the podcast market is very saturated right now, and it is very difficult to grow a podcast in 2025, 2026. So there was a part of me that had to very seriously reflect on that and decide if I want to continue putting in all the work that I've been putting under the risk that it might not go anywhere. There was a part of me that wanted to quit, but after putting thorough thought into it, I realized that I want to keep going. And that might seem crazy to some people, because for some people, this could just all be a huge waste of time. But when I reflect back on it, I love doing this podcast. And even if this podcast never makes me money or never becomes very successful, for me, it's already successful in the sense that I'll always have something to look back on. It's like a diary for me. Like I'll be able to, in my 80s and 90s, if I'm lucky enough to make it to that age, I'll be able to look back and have documentation of where I'll be able to look at this episode and have documentation of where I was at in 2025 with my health issues and how I overcame that. And, you know, I've been doing this podcast for, I want to say 3 years now. And I love looking back at old episodes, and I don't regret any of the conversations or the people I've met doing this podcast. I'm on episode 161, which I'm very proud of. And another thing is that when I did some research, I found that not a lot of people even make it past episode 50 when they start a podcast, because the podcast market is so saturated that a lot of people have this idea, let's start a podcast. And then once they realize the work that goes into it, they give it up. And when I really looked at those numbers, I said, you know what? I don't want to give up. I don't want to be one of those people. I want to keep going. And like I said, if it never becomes successful in the traditional sense, or if it never makes me money, it's something that I'm going to be very proud to look back on and look back at all these great people I've met and these conversations I've had, these lessons I've learned, how much I've become a better listener over the years because of podcasting. When I was in my younger 20s, I was very rude and I interrupted people a lot, and I still do it. I still have issues with it, but this podcast has trained me to be a way better listener, and I'm not nearly as bad as I used to be cutting people off and that sort of thing. So I am going to be continuing this podcast, which I'm very happy to let you guys know. I do possibly want to consider how I direct the podcast going forward. And I have some ideas, but one of the idea that keeps coming back to me lately is drawing inspiration from this podcast that I really love called Soft White Underbelly. I don't even know if it's so much a podcast. It's its own thing. It's very unique, but he does interviews. So basically, for those of you who don't know what Soft White Underbelly is, it's basically, there was this really great photographer living in LA, and he used to take photos of people living on Skid Row. And he would take these really raw and authentic photos of real human beings struggling on Skid Row with drug addiction and whatnot. And over time, I guess he was a smart guy and he wanted to adapt with technology and adapt with the direction things are going. He decided, what if I somehow combined photography into video form? So he would take photos of the people he interviewed and he would use it as the thumbnail of the video, and then he would interview the person for like 20 minutes or so. Nowadays his episodes are much longer, but when he first started out, he would just go on the streets of Skid Row, take a video of the person that he was taking the photo of. He would ask them questions about their life, and then he would take a photo and use that as the thumbnail. And slowly over time, it evolved into this awesome podcast. And the reason I really like it is because he interviews real people. You hear all kinds of things, trauma survivors. He has episodes of porn stars and just like all and the reason I like this authentic raw interview type podcast is because I'm not a huge fan of the direction where a lot of these modern podcasts are going. I feel like they're kind of taking a corporate celebrity, they're interviewing like all these celebrities and rich people, and how do I put it? There's a lot of, it's becoming the next Oprah, if that makes sense. I'm having a really hard time articulating it, but I feel like we're kind of losing the authenticity in podcasting. Not all of them. There's still a lot of podcasts which I really love to listen to. I'm still a huge Joe Rogan fan. But I feel like a lot of and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to put anybody's podcast down, but I feel like a lot of the podcasts I used to love are becoming like, today I'm going to interview someone who's going to give you a life hack on how to, that type of stuff. And I want to hear the real stories. I want to hear the stories that make me cry. I want to hear the stories that inspire me. I want to hear the stories of resilience, of people who have overcome these incredible challenges. So how to take that inspiration and, apply it to my podcast. I don't want to, take the photography aspect of things. That's his own idea and that's his thing. But I think I want to start interviewing people with raw emotional stories. I don't know how I'm going to meet people. Maybe I just kind of have to do my own digging on the internet, find YouTubers that have small channels. And if I come across a story of something I like, ask them if they want to come on my channel. Maybe put, in Philadelphia, maybe put like a Facebook, ad or something saying that I'm looking for people with like a story to tell sort of thing. But I want to get to the raw, real, authentic part of people on this podcast. And I kind of have, in a sense. For example, when I interview musicians, I'll ask them music questions, but then for a large portion of the podcast, I'll ask them what is their biggest regret in life. And it's funny, I always enjoy that part of the episode better. I always enjoy that part of the conversation when I can get to the real raw part of these humans. So I think I want to focus my podcast on trying to get into more of that, because that's what I enjoy the most, and I think the world needs more of that right now, because I think we're going into this AI generated future. And I think with everything becoming so digitalized, I think we're missing out on a lot of real, raw human connection. So if I can somehow merge those two worlds, if I could take real, raw human beings and merge them with the, generated futuristic world, which is kind of what Soft White Underbelly does. It takes, these people and it expresses this real rawness of them. I want to somehow be able to do that myself on my podcast as well. I find that very inspiring and touching. So that's something for me to think about this year. And of course, fitness and my podcast and just pouring my heart into my new relationship that I'm in right now with my boyfriend, and reconnecting with my family and my friends now that I'm feeling better. So I'm feeling very hopeful for the new year. Fingers crossed nothing crazy happens again, because I had a lot of hope for last year as well. And then all that unexpected illness came. But I'm hoping I get a break and that I could have a year to breathe and progress forward again. But yeah, so that's it. That's all I have to share with you guys for today. There will be much more to share in the 2026 year. And that's it. Pranzata Podcast, episode 161. Have a good day, guys, and Happy New Year.